Recording. Okay, there you go. All right, welcome everybody. And there's Barry. Barry's coming on board. All right. And go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, so this past Friday was kind of the end of the semester for me. There's another week of classes this week, but I finished a course on the Gospel of John, and this was the third time that I've taught this course. It's nice in that it's a small group to kind of do a book study together with. There are only 4 cadets in my class. But as it's the third year, it's interesting to me that each year I've kind of received something different as we've gone through the Gospel of John. The syllabus doesn't change very much at all, but as we're going through it again, there's something that I feel like God wants me to focus on personally. There's a different part that stands out to me. Often, if we all open to the same passage and circled what stood out to us, probably God's going to use that same passage to say something different to each one of us. And that happens as we come back to the Word. If you have a Bible that you kind of underline things or circle things, as you come back, maybe you'll think, why did that word stand out to me last time? Or maybe it's just something completely different this time. So that's kind of what it's been like the past 3 years. The first year, I really felt drawn to all the I am statements. I'm the living water. I am the good shepherd. I'm the bread of life. The following year, I was really drawn to one specific I am statement, the vine and the branches in John 15, and just thinking about what that means to remain in the vine. But this year, I was drawn to a character within John's gospel, and that's what I want to talk about tonight. John the Baptist. He shows up early in that first chapter. And I use Barclay's commentary as kind of what we use in addition just to reading through the scripture. But he suggests early on that the Apostle John wants to make sure people don't elevate John the Baptist higher than they should. That people might have, in the days of John, the Apostle John, to say, man, we have these two amazing prophets, John the Baptist and Jesus, and almost wanting to look at their teachings almost side by side. And John wants to make sure that people have a proper perspective of who John is. While John is amazing, he himself did not even see himself as anywhere close to an equal with Jesus. We see in that first chapter, he was not the light, but he was a witness to the light. He said, I'm a voice in the wilderness, that Jesus surpasses me, and I'm really not even worthy to untie his sandals. And in the third chapter, you see there's like a conversation that happens with some of John's disciples where they come to John and they say, you know that guy you baptized, Jesus? His disciples are starting to baptize people just like you've been doing. And now the crowd is following after him. Almost a little bit of jealousy starting to creep in to say, what happened? Why aren't they following you any longer? Why are they following this new guy? And that's where we get that verse in John 3:30 where John the Baptist says, you know what? Nobody gets anything other than what God has given them. And he says, my joy has been made complete. And he must become greater, and I must become less. Or he must increase, and I must decrease. So I just want us to focus on that a little bit. Those words of John, that example of John, that witness, he gives us a great example of how to point people to Jesus. Sometimes we can make it a little more than we should about ourselves, instead of serving as a witness and pointing people to Jesus. I'm sure in a group of writers that's never happened, that we would think more highly of ourselves than we ought. When something gets published or somebody has a kind word to share about maybe somebody that's written a book or an article in here, and nobody starts to get a big head, I'm sure, or allow pride to creep in. One of the things that I do love about this group is I think it does a good job in keeping us humble. Each month we get things to work on, reminding us how much we still have to learn. When you start to get that little bit of a big head and think, okay, I'm getting a little bit better at this, and you submit that article, humility is just a month away. So in Paul's email, he referenced me having that article in the Officer magazine. So I go in to get the mail here on campus, and I see the issue of the Officer there, and I take it into Major Lee's office, who's right across the hall from there. And all he says to me is, humble yourself, which is a good reminder as we think about John's example, that God has given us gifts to point people to Jesus. So even as we continue to write, may we submit these gifts to the Lord to use as he sees fit, that Jesus might increase and that we might decrease. Let's pray together. God, we thank you for the example of John the Baptist, and we do hope that we might decrease and you might increase, Lord. As we share these gifts and this love for writing, God, we do pray that you would help to improve each one of our skills, that we might be sharpened, but also that we might offer any gifts that you've given to us back to you, Lord, that anytime that pride does creep in, Lord, may your humble spirit just gently remind us to keep things in perspective. You have been so good to us, so faithful, and we thank you. We love you. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Okay, glad to see that Brad was able to be with us after all. He was not certain of that earlier in the day, so thank you, Brad, for doing whatever you had to do to get to the video. And glad to see Dean with us way up there in New Jersey, right? Yes. Yeah, up there somewhere.
Well, we live in New York, just on the border of Jersey, yeah.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
close enough to see Jersey, which is a lot closer than a lot of us would like to be.
Well, our appointment is in Jersey, so.
Okay, there you have it. All right. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, we this month has been a little crazy. So if I cross wires with anything tonight with the writers group, I apologize in advance. So if we're a little confused, because at the last minute you saw that Paul Ryerson had to drop out, and I tried to gerrymander things around. So I hope that I have this straight tonight on who's doing the critiquing and who's doing the presenting. We've got 3 articles, I believe, as it turns out, to be presented tonight. So, and we're going to do that. And the critiquing is I think, Barry, you don't need to do any critiquing tonight. So I just wanted to make sure you're okay with that. All right. All right. So, then we'll go ahead and get started with Thomas. Why don't you do your presentation, and Mike will do the critique, and then we'll all jump in on Thomas and beat him to a pulp. The humbling thing that was just talked about. Okay. You got to unmute.
Thank Josh for prepping me.
Yeah.
It feels like it was a bit of a conspiracy here. So this time I decided to just try something different. Over time I've done a poem one time and then doing some other stuff. And this time I decided that I wanted to start out by doing something that was just kind of reporting on, just kind of a look at, almost like like a reporting article. And I think I started out okay, but I think I failed miserably at the end of that for that purpose, because then the preacher came out and I started drawing conclusions, which I'm sure is terrible. So here we go. 2 combatants, 2 battles, 2 vastly different outcomes. The enemies were the Israelites, God's chosen people, and the other, the Philistines. The primary common characteristic of each clash was the Israelites' desire to entice Yahweh to join the conflict on their side. One of the battles brought victory and deliverance to the Israelites because of the miraculous and dynamic engagement of the God of Abraham. The other battle cost them dearly in lives and the loss of the Ark of the Covenant due to the scale of the defeat. In one battle, the Lord arrived in holy power. In the other, he watched without participating. As recorded in 1 Samuel 4, the first battle brought an Israelite army that had suffered recent military humiliation and defeat to the field. After discussing their dire situation, the leadership decided to achieve victory over the enemy by bringing God into the fray. He had brought miraculous deliverance in the past through the power of the Ark of the Covenant, so it was reasonable to expect the same outcome again. Therefore, when the sacred Ark arrived on the scene, which for them ensured a coming victory, the Israelite army shouts were so loud that the ground shook. They could not lose the next battle. They had God on their side. When the Philistines heard the great noise coming from the enemy camp and learned that the ark had arrived, they were filled with intense fear. They also believed that God had been brought onto the battlefield and wondered how they could defeat a deity. Yet, as the day unfolded, the confident Israelites, with the ark leading them, were soundly defeated. On that terrible day, 30,000 Israelite soldiers were killed, and the Ark of the Covenant was captured and taken away by the Philistines. The second battle that occurred 20 years later, as recorded in 1 Samuel 7, had a very different outcome. Under the guidance of Samuel, the Israelites had gathered on Mount Mizpah. After decades of subjugation and defeat, the Israelites had run out of ideas on how they could achieve victory by their own hands or through their attempts to manipulate God to join the conflict. In desperation, after all their efforts had proven ineffective, they decided on a novel approach. They would listen to God. This shift from doing to listening to his directions opened the way to the miraculous. Samuel told the people to begin this battle by cleansing themselves from their ungodly idols and the nation from its unrighteousness. The Lord directed his people to seek holiness through fasting, prayer, confession, worship, and sacrifice. After destroying the idols at home, the Israelites gathered on Mount Mizpah to corporately cleanse themselves before God. On that day they fasted, and there they confessed, "We have sinned against the Lord." 1 Samuel 7:6b. The Philistines, full of confidence that another crushing victory was in their hands, also arrived on the scene. And when the Israelites saw them approaching the hill, they were filled with great fear and cried out to Samuel for salvation. Instead of issuing battle orders and weapons checks, Samuel turned to the altar. Instead of giving a stirring battle speech, he prayed to God and sacrificed a lamb. The response from God was extraordinary. As the Philistines approached, the Lord thundered with a great noise that terrified the enemy and sent them desperately running away. The Israelites, seeing their confusion, ran after them, cutting them down as they fled. The critical difference between these two battles was the presence of God. In the first case, the people decided how they wanted God to act to support their decisions. They viewed him as a tool to be wielded by their hands instead of seeking to make themselves a tool in his. For the second battle, they listened to what God wanted of them and sought righteousness. As counterintuitive as it may seem in our core or individual spiritual lives, the more we attempt to dictate the terms of our relationship with God, the more powerless we become. If we want God to move in our midst, our humility and righteousness before him is the key to opening the door to his power and presence. Excuse me.
Hey, Mike.
All right. I liked this. I like the way you did it. I like what you said. I like how you said it. And and then your application at the end, in particular, leading it towards everyday life of corps officers or officership or spiritual life as an individual, powerful and surprising a little bit. Although it's a very, very clear application. But having said that, a couple thoughts occurred to me as I went through it. And some of it, well, we'll see what you think. Some of it might just be style. Some of it might be preference. You know, the kind of things that we like to read. I claim no officialdom. I claim no comparison against a thesaurus or a book of guidance and that kind of stuff. I can't even get my computer to work the editor thing on my papers anymore, but I'll be working on that, continue to work on that. But let's go to paragraph 1, line 4. Brought victory. One of the battles brought victory and deliverance to the Israelites. I wonder if that's not strong enough and sentence enough. And it goes on to say, because of the miraculous and dynamic engagement of the God of Abraham. Well, that's nice. But the point of what you were trying to talk about, two vastly different outcomes and so forth, didn't get into the fact of how many bullets arrived and how many swords and how many spears, not the reason and how. It was, boom, in my opinion, a simple statement. It brought victory and deliverance to the Israelites, period. And that leads me to the second sentence, the loss of the ark. The other battle cost them dearly in lives and the loss of the Ark of the Covenant. And that's plenty of info right there too. Not due to what or all those kind of things, but I just thought that there was it extended a little too far, a couple words too far. Do with obviously what you want. Second paragraph, line number 3. Leadership decided to achieve victory over the enemy by bringing God into the fray. Part of the problem with that is that we know the whole story. I read the whole thing, and I realized that they may have thought they would achieve victory, but I would think a better word there, other than achieving victory, would be attempt victory, because we know what really happened. Just a thought. Paragraph 2, line 7. They could not lose the next battle. They had God by their side. Well, we know that you were emphasizing what was in their heads and in their minds when they were putting this stuff together, but we also know the results again. So I wonder if we don't couch it by saying they didn't think they could lose or wouldn't lose. They didn't think they would or could lose the next battle, because obviously they could lose, right? So, but I know it's a subtlety of the writing, potentially. Just a thought. Paragraph 3. They also believed. Let's see where we go. They also believed that God had been brought onto the battlefield and wondered how they could defend a deity. And we're talking about the Philistines now. The problem with a god, when we mention the Philistines, is that they had multiple gods. And so I would say maybe they believed that the God of Israel had entered into the scene, because that was the enemy, and that's what they were concerned about. Somehow they had parallel concepts, right? They believed in multiple gods. So maybe that would have been made it just a tad clearer. They wondered how they could defeat not a deity, but this deity, the God of Israel. The end of that sentence, or the end of that paragraph 3. On that terrible day, 30,000 Israelite soldiers were killed, period. The Ark of the Covenant was captured, and perhaps, rather than simply captured and taken away by the Philistines, victory was won by the Philistines. Just to go along with your winning and losing and whole piece. No trouble with paragraph 4 that I had. Paragraph 5. Samuel told the people to begin the battle by cleansing themselves, and then it said the Lord directed his people. And I know, but the Lord didn't say anything in that text per se. Samuel heard from the Lord and did all the talking. So I would think he would need to get some credit for that, or according to Samuel, the Lord directed, or something along those lines. Chapter 7, verse 3. He was serious about returning to the Lord. People need to be serious about returning to the Lord, determined to obey. Then he would rescue them. That kind of thing. Just subtlety, a small thing. And then paragraph 6. They were filled with great fear. When the Israelites saw them approaching, they were filled with great fear and cried out to Samuel for salvation. I wonder, and again, it might be my background, my reading, the term salvation means more things to me than a little bit. And I just wondered if, I think the text itself said, plead with God to save us, at least in one version of the Bible. If that would have been a little bit clearer instead of just slightly in another direction. And then the last thing, on the very last line, verse 7. So the Philistines, where we go, cutting them down as they fled. The Israelites, seeing their confusion, ran after them. And I wondered if we would want to say, or if it felt good to say, and so the Philistines were subdued, instead of ending it with cutting them down. Again, the victory, the whole thing was there's two battles going on, and they ended up in two different ways. And so that would help clarify that. That was the way verse 13, chapter 7, verse 13 ended anyway. So the Philistines were subdued. And then it goes on with the closing sentence and the good comparisons and everything that you made. So those are just some thoughts that I had as I read through it.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah. I like how you bring it together at the end. You warned us about you're going to get preaching, but I was good with the preaching. I thought
Amen.
it brought it together.
Yeah.
So that wasn't an issue for me at all. I also like the way you start with those two combatants, two battles, two vastly different outcomes. If there were more places to do something like that later on as well. I see some things in there as far as even breaking up the sentences that it seems like a preference, not a wrong thing, but it seems like you'd rather go with a semicolon than starting a new sentence. So I don't know if that makes it feel similar to that first style at the beginning where it's point, point, point. Just to break up those, it's in one or two places I think it was a comma, but the last sentence of each of the first paragraphs have a semicolon and could have been an additional sentence instead of but I think that's just a preference thing.
One thought.
Go ahead.
On the second page, the third line beginning after decades of subjugation and defeat, the Israelites had run out of ideas. And that felt almost like the problem was, they just needed some more ideas. And so I just rewrote it in my head. The Israelites had exhausted every prospect of victory by their own hands. It's just a little more definitive. It's a thought.
Okay. Anybody else? Let me share then, if no one else has anything. I also agree with what was already said, that I don't feel like this article drifted off into preachiness. I felt like it came to a good conclusion. So Thomas, I think you're a little too hard on yourself with that. This led very nicely to that conclusion. So having said that, let me do the rest. The second paragraph, I will say this: you tend to use a passive form of choices of words, and I would recommend you try to find stronger words where you can. For example, in the first line of the second paragraph, you say, as recorded in 1 Samuel 4, the first battle brought an Israelite army. I would choose the word featured rather than brought. You already used brought in the previous paragraph, and brought is less action oriented than featured. Okay, brought is kind of like I brought a basket of goodies. Featured is, more the idea boom, it's front and center, if you see what I mean by that. So try to find maybe stronger words, especially when you're talking about in military terms, because you're trying to cast a picture of a battle. So you want to look for stronger terms. In the third line, and again, here's where you tend to use a passive voice. And that is in the third line, the leadership decided to achieve victory over the enemy. You want to just say there, defeat the enemy. Achieve victory over, you're using a noun to convey this. When you can use a verb, you want to use a verb form. So defeat is a verb. Victory is a noun. So you want to try to use the verb because it's stronger. Does that make sense? You're muted. So if you're trying to say something to me, Thomas, okay, you're just pointing thumbs up. All right, do it that way. Okay, the next line, I just questioned the idea. Now you may be again conveying the thought of the Israelites, and if you are, that's fine. It wasn't real clear to me. You said he had brought miraculous deliverance in the past through the power of the Ark of the Covenant. Well, we know that the Ark of the Covenant did not have power; it was God, and that the Ark of the Covenant was a symbol of God. So, and again, if you're trying to convey that was the sort of the superstitious belief of the Israelites, that's fine. But we want to make sure that we don't give into Raiders of the Lost Ark kind of thinking here or conveying that. Okay. So it's not like a supercharged battery kind of thing.
Yeah, and all things that Mike said and Josh said and you said, what I was attempting to do was bounce back and forth. So get in the head of
Okay.
Israelites, get
Okay,
in the head of the Philistines.
Well, I think you need to say what they believed or what they thought or what they were sure of was. Okay. So we know that you're not stating that. You're stating their opinion.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, trying to get in their heads, trying to convey what they would have been thinking.
Yeah. And I understand that, but it's a little unclear. And we want to make sure that you don't get nailed to the wall by somebody saying that you're trying to, teach something that's not true. Anyway, just say that for what it's worth. Going to the next page. Again, watch the passive voice. The second line of the first paragraph. Under the guidance of Samuel, the Israelites had gathered. Drop had, just gathered. You don't need had. So had gathered is passive, gathered is active. Okay. And the same thing with the third line. You see halfway through the line, the Israelites had run, just ran out of ideas. Okay. Okay. Had run is probably more correct grammatically. Forget it. It doesn't convey action like you're trying to convey. And the same thing going to the next line, they could achieve victory. Achieve is not a stronger word as win victory or claim victory or something. Achieve is kind of more of a kind of like, I don't know, you passed a quiz or something. So I would just say, try to find where you can, try to find stronger verb forms. And that's where a thesaurus is helpful, and you do have a thesaurus feature on Word. So sometimes you'll want to look at that. The final thing I would say to you is on the last page, the third line, as a tool to be wielded by their hands instead of seeking to make themselves a tool in his. That's a very good line. You turn that phrase nicely. So I just want to say to you, I really liked that when I read that and wanted to commend you for that. So overall, this is good. But again, if you're trying to do it like a news story, you have to think, and I like that you were doing narrative reporting. But again, in narrative reporting, they do attribute, this is what this person said, this is what this person said, or this is what they thought. And that's what I think when we talk about these things, where the lack of clarity is you're not doing that. And I would recommend, if you want to make this like a news report, at least in the opening section, then you need to kind of make sure that we know who's thinking what, and it's that's their thoughts. Okay. So,
Okay.
yeah, but it's kind of interesting to see that you took this approach. So kudos to you for that. Anything else before we move on? All right. Okay, let's move on then. All right. We'll take on Lynda. Lynda.
All righty. Well,
Who gave her, I love this, Lynda. The title for yours is February Writing Assignment. Now, Lynda, we got to be a little more creative than that, okay?
I'm learning. I'm
Yeah,
learning the expectations for sure.
well, I mean,
Um,
you set that into the war cry. I can just see it. February Writing Assignment by Lynda Thornhill.
well, look, at least I this time put my name on it.
Well, that's true. And okay, that's a step up. That's a step.
That's right. I'm getting there. And I
Yeah.
told my husband today, I was like, the honeymoon period is over for sure. So
Yeah, it doesn't last long in this group.
absolutely. All right.
Yeah.
Well, let me get right to it then.
Okay.
Being a mother is the best thing I've ever done in my life. When I think about Lynda before her children and Lynda after, the biggest difference is not knowing the fullness of joy. Of course, there were joyful times before children, when I learned how to drive, when I graduated from high school and met and married Chris. But I didn't know what it was to love someone else so much, no matter what. And that everything they did, no matter how ridiculous, could make me so proud. I'll admit that there have been times in my experience with our 3 children where I've had to stop and count to 10. Like the time 3-year-old Chase told me, after having been asked twice to go to Sunday school, that he was not going, adding a few colorful words in between. Or the time 4-year-old Caleb found out or found what he thought was chocolate in the medicine cabinet. Trying to get his foot unstuck from the toilet bowl, he experienced extreme diarrhea and shared. Or when 5-year-old Ella decided she would paint her toenails in our newly carpeted closet and spilled an entire bottle of pink polish everywhere. As a mother of now 3 young adult children, 24, 21, and 16, I find myself longing for those days that to me seem not so long ago. And I always thought as a young mother that those days were the most difficult of parenting. And while I certainly don't demean the task of potty training, homework, or disciplining poor choices, I wasn't prepared for being a parent to young adult children. One of the most difficult things I've had to do as a mother is letting a child go. I will never forget the day we dropped Chase off at Gardner-Webb University for his first year of college. The week before, I questioned everything we did as parents. Was he ready? Would he make friends? Would he wake up for his 8 a.m. classes? Would he remember to separate his laundry? Who was I kidding? Would he just remember to wash his clothes at all? Life was different watching Chase leave the I'm sorry, I don't have my reading glasses on. Life was different watching Chase leave the nest and adjusting to everyday life as a family of 4. And what I found was that Chase and eventually Caleb leaving for school was the best thing for both of them. As parents, that's what we're supposed to do. Prepare them to face the world on their own. I'm so proud of who they are. It is difficult to watch them make choices that I wouldn't make for them. I hate seeing them struggle or hurt, but their resilience, that's when I know that Chris and I did it right. I find myself in a new place as we are preparing our last child and our only daughter to make this same journey. Chris and I purposely put 5 years between Caleb and Ella. We were parents at a very young age, and we knew we wouldn't be ready to be empty nesters at 40. We had Ella knowing that she would bring comfort to us while learning how to maneuver through our daily routine without the boys at home. And she has done just that. Let's just say if Ella was our first child, she would be our only child. Not only has Ella been exactly what we needed as we transitioned to a family of 3, she also helped us realize that we might be ready for the empty nest phase. Or maybe that's just us getting old. Who knows? I continue to be amazed every day at the growth that is taking place in our children. While they are grown physically, watching them face challenges, seeing them humbly excel, and watching them develop relationships with their potential future mates, I am reminded of my own spiritual walk with my Savior. I know that there are times when he has to shake his head, wondering what I was doing, or being so disappointed in the choices that I've made. But he's always been there for me through it all, the good and the not so good. I'm thankful for a father who loves me no matter what, and it is my goal to be the same for the children God has gifted to me. 3 John 1:4 says, I have no greater joy than to hear that my children walk in truth. D.A. Carson has a great quote on this verse, saying, in a world where many Christians derive their deepest joy from advancement, ease, promotions, financial security, good health, popularity, and a host of other things, it is delightful, not to say challenging, to hear an apostle testify that nothing stirs his joy more than to hear this, that his children are walking in line with the gospel. That tells us all we need to know of his heart and where we should find our pleasures too. It is my prayer that as I serve the Lord in all I do, I bring him the same joy that I find in my children.
Okay, Brad, I believe you're going to do the critique, so you go ahead and get started.
Yep. Thanks for sharing this with us. And again, all that I'm reflecting are just my thoughts. I'm not definitive, just my thinking. So I'll take it in that light.
Absolutely.
One of the first rules of writing that I had to learn the hard way, meaning multiple times, was that we try not to tell but show when we're expressing a deep idea. And so in that line of thought, I would dispense with your first sentence altogether. Being a mother is the best thing I've ever done in my life. It says everything and nothing at the same time. So just kind of don't start with laying the whole picture out. Let it unfold through your narrative. Beginning when I think about, and then here I would just have you say myself instead of Lynda. When I think about myself before having children and after, the biggest difference is not knowing the fullness of joy. Joy should be lowercase. And then, of course, is also a kind of throwaway phrase. It's a little bit like someone who says it goes without saying. Well, if it goes without saying, then don't. It's kind of along those lines. So I would just cut that and start with there were joyful times before children. And then you have a nice parallel here. When I learned how to drive, graduated from high school, and met and married Chris. That's a good trio there. It has a nice rhythm to it. But then I didn't know what it was to love someone. as has been mentioned before, verbs are very important, and several times you use existing verbs instead of action verbs. You use the being verb instead of a verb that's more descriptive, more vibrant. So again, here, instead of saying, I didn't know what it was, I would say something like, I didn't realize that I could love someone else so much, no matter what. And then you can either keep the no matter in the next sentence to kind of carry that idea, to love someone else no matter what, and that everything they did, no matter, you can keep that, or maybe because of repetition, you might want to try a slightly different expression there. I wasn't clear what you were trying to say with that last sentence, that everything they did, no matter how ridiculous, could make me so proud. Sounds like you're saying that they would do ridiculous things that most people might shake their heads at, but their ridiculous made you proud.
Yeah,
And
they're my kids.
So that needs to just be a little clearer, at least for me,
Sure.
what you're trying to bring across. It just let me stop. I couldn't get to your intent. Again, next paragraph, I'll admit. That's kind of a throwaway phrase. You're admitting it by saying what comes after, so you don't need it. There have been times in my experience when, with our 3 children, where I've had to stop and count to 10. I think where could be when, but again, something more like, at times our 3 children have driven me to stop and count to 10. It's less passive and more descriptive of what you're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And then you have a trio coming up, starting with like the time, and then or the time. And then your third on the next page is or when 5. But in the middle of the second, you add another sentence that breaks up the flow of that idea. So I would come to the sentence where it says or the time and try to bring that together without needing the paragraph after that. And the way it came out for me was, or the time 4-year-old Caleb mistook X-Lax for chocolate with attending consequences. And I also, and then the next sentence, I would just get rid of that entirely, partly because when you say he had extreme diarrhea and shared, that's in preaching what I call a traffic accident illustration, meaning it's so intense and overwhelming that it's hard for the reader or the listener in the sermon to get beyond it. You're just kind of, So I didn't feel like that kept the tone of the rest of your article. That's another reason why I would cut that sentence out.
Okay.
But when you take that out, your flow of your rhythm of your 3 parts of that paragraph flows much better. Then in the sentence, or when 5-year-old Ella decided she would paint her toenails, you can make that a little bit more effective by changing the flow of what your idea is. Instead of saying she painted her toenails in the closet, something like, or when 5-year-old Ella decided that she would paint her toenails and spilled an entire bottle of pink polish in our newly carpeted closet. So you end with the closet getting stained.
Yeah.
And it's just a little more compact and your idea flows better. The next paragraph, I'm not sure you need the numbers 24, 21, and 16. They don't seem to serve any very specific purpose. It's just you're saying these are their ages. You've already said, I think you said you had 3 young adult children. That speaks for itself. And you have a couple of times in that line and the next line where you say those days. We don't know what those days are just from what you've put here. We understand you have specific kind of days in mind, a specific feeling or a period of life, but it isn't clear just from that sentence. I find myself longing for those days. It would help a little bit more to understand what you're trying to say there. Spell that out a bit more. And also not to repeat those days in the next sentence, but again, have some different way of saying what you're trying to bring across, maybe adding to the idea from the previous sentence or something along those lines. Maybe early years of parenting. Then in the next line, you use the expression most difficult, which you also begin the next paragraph with most difficult. And that's an idea you need to think of how to express differently so you don't have that exact same phrase coming up again. Several times you start a sentence with and you can just take that out. We understand you're continuing an idea. Either need to be a comma and a small and, or just dismiss the and start your sentence. And while I always thought, and while I certainly don't. While I certainly don't demean the task of potty training, I think for homework, you mean assisting with homework. You're assisting them. And then I wasn't prepared for being a parent to young adult children. A little bit more context there would be helpful. Again, there's a being verb. I wasn't. Something like, I didn't anticipate the more complex challenges of parenting young adults.
Okay.
I will never forget the day. I'm not sure that worked for me as the sentence flows. The week before we dropped Chase off at Gardner-Webb University for his first year of college, I questioned our parenting's adequacy up to that point. That kind of says what you're saying there, but a bit more directly, a bit more succinctly.
Sure.
As it is on the page, it's feels a little evasive what you're trying to bring across. And then to page 3. Life was different watching Chase leave the nest and adjusting to everyday life as a family of 4. You're combining his thoughts and experiences with your own there. And that just needs cleaned up a little bit. Maybe to keep it in the thoughts of your own experience. Life was different as Chase left the nest and we downsized to a family of 4. And there again is another and another being verb. What I found was, maybe just start with I found that Chase's and eventually Caleb's leaving for school favorably impacted both of them.
Okay.
Because again, you had another was the best thing is another being verb there. So you're cleaning that up. As parents, that's what we're supposed to do. Maybe either a semicolon, or Alan's better at this stuff than I am, but that comma is there's an incomplete expression there. Prepare them, maybe reference our sons and daughters so that it's clear who the them is. It's just brings back that idea that it's a family expression you're talking about. And again, I'm so proud of who they are. You could personalize that by saying my children.
Sure.
Next to last line of that paragraph, I hate seeing them struggle or hurt. I think you're saying struggling or hurting, or struggling or hurt. And then this next sentence, but their resilience, that's when I know that Chris and I did all right. I understand what you're saying there. Just spell it out a bit more completely. Something like, witnessing their resilience confirms for me that Chris and I raised them well.
Yeah.
And that brings your idea out more completely. As we were preparing our last child, without knowing what you're preparing the child for, that word's a little misleading. Try to think of something different to express what you wanted to convey there about what you're doing with your last child as you were helping her prepare for independence, something like that.
Mhm.
I don't know if you wanted to differentiate between the sons and the daughters in a special way. Our last child, maybe comma, our only daughter, comma, would emphasize that more.
Okay.
And in the same journey, I would add something like of independence, because it continues to say what journey you're talking about and refers back to the previous experience of the sons. We were parents, that's a being verb, something like we began parenting while quite young, and we didn't want to empty our nest at 40. That avoids those being verbs. We had Ella knowing that she would bring comfort to us, maybe make that more dynamic, that she would comfort us while we learned how to navigate our daily routine without the boys at home. And she has done just that. Now, here's where you lost me. Again, it might be just how you're thinking that I'm not getting. You say you want her to comfort you. She's done just that. And then if she was our first child, she would be our only child.
Yeah.
I'm hearing that wrong, but that's like saying she was such a handful that if we'd had her first, we wouldn't have had any more, but that doesn't seem comforting. So can you maybe clarify what you're
Sure.
trying to bring across? And then that last line, now, not only has Ella, there's another being verb, been. I would say, not only has Ella cushioned our family's transition from a quartet to a trio, she also helped us realize that we might be ready. And that's another being verb, that we might welcome the empty nest phase. And the final page, to be amazed, is another being verb, something more like I continue to marvel daily. Again, that's a direct verb expressing your experience. While they are grown physically, I'm not sure that you need that. It seemed a little additional to the thought you were tracing. Start with watching them face challenges, seeing them humbly excel, and instead of repeating watching, something like witnessing them develop relationships with their potential future mates. I am reminded of my parallel spiritual walk with my Savior.
Yeah.
I know there are times, and instead of saying our times, I know sometimes he has shaken his head instead of the had verb, as was mentioned before. He has shaken his head, wondered what I was doing, or felt so disappointed in the choices I've made. And then the last line of that paragraph, it is my goal to be the same for the children God has gifted me. Again, maybe the being verb could receive something a little bit more proactive on your part. Is my goal to give my children the same acceptance that God has provided me. And there were just a couple things in the last paragraph. The second line has a great quote saying. You can just put a colon after verse, I believe. You don't need to say saying.
Okay.
Because you say it when you say it.
Yeah.
Fifth line, starting with joy. Joy more than to hear that his children, not this his children. It's just a typo.
Yeah.
And then the next to last line in the middle, pleasures, comma, to. And the period goes inside the quotation marks. That's what I had. Thanks for your patience. That was a lot, I know.
Thank you.
All right, anybody else have comment?
Congratulations on children getting off the payroll.
True.
Yeah,
It's an interesting and well concise, well put summary of a certain season of life. It's good.
Thank you.
anyone else? Okay, well, I just have a few things. Brad picked up a number of them, but one, two, three, fourth paragraph. I may have missed Brad saying this, but where you say the week before I questioned everything we did as parents, I would just put a period there. And then these are a series of questions, so make them questions. Was he ready? Question mark. What would he make friends? Question mark. Okay.
Okay.
So all those, and who was I kidding? Question mark. You know, I mean, and I appreciate you having a little humor in this. That's a good thing. Next paragraph. Use third line as parents. That's what we're supposed to do. I would put a period there, or colon. Prepare them to face the world on their own. Okay.
Mhm.
And also use of numbers. The next paragraph, I have the last paragraph on this page. I find myself in a new place. That paragraph starts there. Second line, I purposely put you use a number 5. Remember, when it's below 12, you use the word. Okay, so that should be spelled out. Okay, let me go to the next thing here. Oh, and the end of that paragraph, or maybe that's just us getting old. I put a period there. Who knows? Question mark.
Okay.
Okay. I like this next paragraph. This is a very nice transition to a spiritual application from what you've said about parenting. So I really like this transition. It's very, very well done to move us into this is my, I'm moving us from this phase to this phase. I liked it. So, just say that to you. And also, the last paragraph, you don't begin a paragraph with a number. Even though I said what I just said, you always spell
Yes.
out. I
Yeah.
always say in the beginning of a sentence.
Yeah.
So I just got a warning about my computer running out of juice, so I've got to plug it in. Hold on. Sorry, folks. Technical difficulties. And I can't find my cord. Where did I put my silly cord? All right, talk among yourselves.
I focused all of my comments on changes and corrections, but I did very much appreciate how it snuck up on me that you were leading up to this parallel with your spiritual walk. And it still resonated strongly with the feel for family and transition and change and nostalgia. But dropping this spiritual observation into that just let it absorb that same warm feeling, and it kept it from becoming a theological aside. It just blended in well with the ideas you were already sharing. So thanks.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. I'm back with my power source. I'm okay, fine. My crisis is averted. All right. Anybody else on this before we move on?
I could only comment about how accurate the early statements were. The honeymoon's over.
Yeah, this is very true.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it is sometimes hard to sit there and listen to all these different things, but these are things that make our writing better. And so
Yeah.
that's the reason we go through it.
I feel such a part now. Thank you.
Welcome, you're part of it. Okay. All right, anything else there? Okay, then let's move on to Josh's piece, and Dean will be doing the critique on this. So Josh, please go ahead and read this.
Let the beauty of Jesus be seen in me. Why does biodiversity loss matter? I was taking a course on sustainable development. My professor pressed our class to explain why he should be concerned about endangered species. Do environmental factors matter in humanity's search for progress? I waited for others to respond before offering my opinion. It seemed like the safest route, to sit back and watch as the professor scrutinized each response before offering an answer of my own. The assigned reading that week was Stephen Meyer's book, The End of the Wild, which laments the current extinction crisis facing our world as human development destroys the wilderness and the ecosystems that depend on it. The argument was laid out so well that I did not even question the underlying premise. Why does this problem matter? Won't humans eventually be impacted if other species are harmed? Do humans have a moral obligation to protect other forms of life? As my classmates made their arguments, they seemed like good reasons to care about biodiversity loss to me. But my professor seemed less convinced. Finally, I offered my answer to his question: beauty. When we lose biodiversity, we lose the beauty it holds in God's creation. Beauty can be hard to define and harder to defend, but we know it when we see it. A work of art, a sunset on a beach, the perfect song. There's an attraction, an aroma, a curiosity piqued. This summer, I took my family on an all-American cross-country road trip. We set out from Georgia to California and back again. If you've never driven from one end of the country to the other in a car full of kids, it is as you would imagine, long and arduous. But honestly, it was more beautiful than I can explain. Children carry the sense of wonder and honesty that often eludes adults. Our trip around the U.S. reminded me of the beauty of God's creation. I had never been to most of the states out west. They were new to me, unlike the scenery from Georgia to Oklahoma. When we hit New Mexico, the landscape changed and became unrecognizable. The land of enchantment indeed. Each new state, whether Arizona, Colorado, or Utah, captured my attention. Each time we turned a corner, I was in awe, urging my family to stop what they were doing to look around. God's creation was on full display. In describing what I saw, words fall short. Pictures failed to do it justice. The vast expanse, the rock formations, the vibrant colors, all crafted by a loving creator. Creation points to the creator and accentuated my awareness of his presence. The beauty captured my heart and mind, which led to an outpouring of genuine worship. I was reminded of the words from Psalm 96:9. Worship the Lord in the splendor of holiness. Tremble before him, all the earth. For me, there is a strong connection between beauty and holiness. There is something so other about God that we are drawn to him. An elusive something that cannot be explained, but we know it when we see it. It attracts us, fills us with wonder. When we encounter the holy, really experience the holy, the heart devoted to God responds in worship. Ultimately, we see the fullness of God's beauty and holiness in Jesus. People were drawn to him. There was something different about Jesus. His miracles reveal God's glory. His teachings held authority. His reputation preceded him. Crowds followed him. They were drawn to his beauty, not a physical beauty, but a beauty of holiness and otherness. People are still drawn to Jesus today. Sometimes the attractional quality of Jesus is hard to put into words, though we try. A fullness of love, a perfect peace, a new hope. What is it about Jesus that holds hearts and minds? Beauty is an aspect of my faith that until recently, I have not given adequate attention. I recently began reading a book by General Frederick Coots, The Splendor of Holiness. He suggests the Christian life should be a thing of beauty, meaning it should be attractive or pique the interest of non-believers. Far too often, Christianity is presented as unappealing. Yet in truth, a life of following Jesus is full of beauty. This leaves me challenged. As a follower of Jesus, do others see the beauty of Christ through me? I pray they do. If not, I appeal to my God to make it so in my life. Let the beauty of Jesus be seen in me, all his wonderful passion and purity. O thou Spirit divine, all my nature refine. till the beauty of Jesus be seen in me.
Okay, Dean, you're on.
All right. Josh, thanks for sharing. And your piece made me remember many trips with our own family. And so I think there's a power in that. You drew me into memories of taking our kids on long trips. And so thanks for doing that. First thing is, you want to correct the title. It should be "Let the Beauty of Jesus Be Seen in Me." I wondered if you might want to consider rewording the first two sentences. It was hard for me to. I was going from those two sentences and then into do environmental factors matter and humanity search for progress. I wasn't sure if that was again the professor posing a question, which is not in quotes. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was a question that you were thinking about. But I thought maybe you might want to reword those first couple of sentences there so that we get the setting clearly. You're sitting in class, and the class is on sustainable development, and the professor's putting the question to the class: why does biodiversity loss matter? And do environmental factors matter in humanity's search for progress? So that's a thought on that. Let's see. So in the second paragraph, I believe the end of the wild should be in quotation marks as the title of a book. Is that correct, Alan?
Yes, it should be in probably italics.
Italics, okay.
Yeah.
The style, the style guide, I think, says I wondered about italics. I like italics. That's good.
Well, it's okay. It's one of those things in transition right now. I didn't want to get into this, but I prefer italics. I think it's clearer.
I do too.
Yeah, because we do magazine articles and quotes and italics for book titles. Is what traditionally been done. I'm sorry,
Right.
but
no. I'm asking the question.
Yeah, and I just think it's clearer to put movie titles, TV series titles, book titles in italics.
Right.
It just
right
is clearer. Okay.
Right. Yep. Let's see. Oh, there was one. I don't know if you'd want to consider making that into two sentences also, Josh. The assigned reading that week was Stephen Meyer's book, The End of the Wild, period. In his book, the author laments the current, or something like that, and just split that up into two sentences, maybe. Give it some thought. Would italics be good here also, Alan? The premise, why does this problem matter? Or should it be a colon?
It should be. Yeah, I have in my marks here, I put a underlying premise, colon, why does this problem matter? That was going to be one of my comments. So yeah, but not italics. It doesn't need to be italics.
Okay, so a colon to kind of set it apart.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. All right. Yeah. I wondered where it says instead of as my classmates, so it's I can't what paragraph that is. Can you see where I'm at, Josh?
I can.
Third paragraph.
Yes.
Yeah, as my classmates made their arguments, they seemed like good reasons to care about that biodiversity loss to me, but my professor seemed less convinced. I wonder if you might say something like, I thought they seemed like good reasons to care about biodiversity loss, and eliminate to me. but my professor seemed less convinced. It's just a suggestion. When we lose the sentence, the last sentence of that same paragraph, when we lose the biodiversity, comma, we lose the beauty it holds in God's creation. That sounds a little unclear to me. I think I understand what you mean. You might consider we lose a dimension of the beauty of God's creation. We don't lose all the beauty of God's creation, but it's just I found that to be a little bit unclear. Let's see. Beauty can be, next paragraph, beauty can be hard to define and harder to defend. I think you might want to say the concept of beauty can be hard to define and harder to defend. I think that might bring a little more clarity. But I love this sentence here, a work of art, a sunset on the beach, the perfect song. There's an attraction, an aroma, a curiosity peak. That is great. The examples of things that catch our breath, right? And so I just like that very much. Yeah. So then, if the next paragraph, again, I love this image of these cross-country trips, and man, are we there yet? Suggestion: if you've never driven from one end of the country to the other in a car full of kids, I think you could shorten that by just saying if you've never driven cross-country with a car full of kids or in a car full of kids. That makes it a little more concise and impactful. It is, as you would imagine, long and arduous. The last sentence of this paragraph, children carry this sense of awe. That's the same paragraph, right? Yeah. Children carry this sense of wonder and honesty that often eludes adults. Our trip around the U.S. reminded me of the beauty of God's creation. I don't know if you consider rewording that as well, and kind of going back to the sentence above, but honestly, it was more beautiful than I can explain. Something like, honestly, observing our children's sense of wonder in response to the beauty we encountered made the trip worthwhile.
Yeah, it was a sentence I had a hard time with, because I tried to draw the kids the way the kids, and it just became too long. And I
but I know what you're going. But I know what you're going for. So I think you're there. It just needs a little more polishing, because when you see your children taking in the sights and being amazed, it reminds you of that which we have lost and which does elude us. So I like that. Let's see. So every time we turned a corner, the last sentence of the next paragraph, every time we turned a corner, I was in awe, urging my family to stop what they were doing and to look around. Consider, again, for impact, consider making these shorter sentences, 2 sentences. Every time we turned a corner, I was in awe, period. And then make that next its own sentence. Let's see. So God's creation was on full display. In describing the next paragraph per sentence, in describing what I saw, words fall short, pictures fail to do it justice. I think this could do with a little rewording as well. Words fall short in attempting to describe what I saw, or something in God's creation, or something like that. But just rewording it, saying I read things out loud a lot, and just to hear if it sounds cumbersome to me, I know I got to go back with a chisel or something and just kind of hone it away. It's just a suggestion. I wondered, and I know we don't know each other, so please, I'm just sharing this in. I just wondered if you might even come up with a better scripture verse to think about. I thought of Psalm 19:1, the heavens declare the glory of God. Psalm 111:2, great are the works of the Lord. They are pondered by those who delight in them. And maybe Romans 1:20, just considering that. I love this paragraph, though. There's a strong connection between beauty and holiness. This is spot on.
And that is
There's-
where that connection to this song.
Yeah. But I think there's a version that actually says worship the Lord in the beauty of holiness, right?
It does.
So you might
That
want
was one that I went back and forth. The King James says the beauty of holiness. The NIV
Right.
says splendor,
Yeah.
which is connects to the book at the
Yeah.
end from Coots.
Yeah. So I mean, why not go for it? Go for the KJV. You know,
Yeah.
it was good enough for Paul.
But I knew somebody else would be. There's this guy named Alan that likes the NIV.
Yes,
no,
I do.
listen,
I'm
let me
just
let me just assert here. I am not, I mean, NIV is the most used version right now, but for effect, you can use any version of the Bible you like. And sometimes the King James version is the best version.
It is.
I'll say that to you right now,
Yeah.
flat out.
It
So-
is He who has made us, and not we ourselves.
Yeah. Well, I mean, thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. You can't beat that.
You
Okay?
can't.
You can't beat that. Anyway.
Mic drop. Yeah. So I would go with the worship the Lord in the beauty of holiness, because it just underscores what you're saying. But this, I don't want to, I mean, this paragraph here to me is gold. For me, there's a strong connection between beauty and holiness. There's something so other about God that we are drawn to him, an elusive something that cannot be explained, but we know it when we see it. I think it wouldn't hurt to pull out a 50-cent word here, from theologians and talk and use the word transcendence. I think you want to think about weaving that in somewhere, because that's the word that captures all that you're saying. Transcendence, it's being at the edge of the Grand Canyon, which I'm sure you were at, and other places where your breath is taken away, right? And it's like that and then into this next sentence and next paragraph, which is great. Ultimately, we see the fullness of God's beauty and holiness in Jesus. There it is, right? And so the only thing I would suggest about that paragraph is that you might want to think about putting in a scripture reference where that's emphasized in the New Testament in Christ's ministry. I was thinking of John 4, the woman at the well, when she says, "Just come and see a man who he told me everything I ever did." It's a winsomeness of Jesus, right? And so yeah, I love that. The next paragraph, beauty is an aspect of my faith that until recently I have not given adequate attention to, or how should that be reworded, Alan? It seems had.
The best way is for which I have not given adequate attention.
Right. To which I had not given adequate attention.
For which or to which I had not given adequate attention, because you don't want to end a sentence with a preposition.
Right. And so then going to the next sentence, Josh, you used recently in that sentence. So you gotta do something else with I recently began reading a book. I think it's coming up too quickly. So not long ago or something like that. And yeah, let's see. That's pretty much it.
Okay. Anybody else have any comments?
Hey, I've been pretty quiet all night, guys.
Amazingly so, Barry.
You're right, Alan. Hey, really, this Dean, I haven't heard you before. Great comments on this last article, by the way. And Brad, I appreciated yours as well. On this one, Josh, I was your doctrine teacher at EBC, and yeah, it's to your detriment. But I really appreciated your attention to natural revelation. Okay. I think that's underserved sometimes in the church, and I really appreciated that, to how God speaks to us through nature and through our children and through their reactions and everything. So I really did appreciate that. Keep it up. You're a good writer, and as obviously most of the people in this group are. And so I just wanted to say that. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Oh, by the way, I'm sitting here in my office at the divisional headquarters. I'm a big Coots fan. Okay.
You can see this as a new book. It's just come out. Splendor of Holiness.
Yeah. I need to look at that. But if I didn't make it clear when I was your doctrine teacher, I'm a big Coots fan as opposed to Bringle. Not that they're opposed to one another, but
both and.
Yeah, I appreciate your quoting him.
Okay. Anybody else want to make a comment on this article? Well, then if you want to jump in here, go ahead. But I want to just share a few things with you, Josh. In the first paragraph, fourth line down toward the end of it, it says it seemed like the safest route. I would reword that to the safest route seems. Okay, I would just put it that way. And the third paragraph, when you were talking about your answer, I really love the turn in the conversation from like a purely scientific one to an aesthetic one. And I just really like that. And it did set the table for the rest of your article. So that was as nice a transition, because here it looked like we're going to go along this very scientific discussion, and boom, here we have this wonderful transition. It was just, I said, I like that. That was really, really, really well done. So hats off to you, young man.
Thank you. And some of Dean's stuff at the beginning too was really the teacher asked that question, but all those other things that I tried to add were kind of there wasn't a direct quote, but it's almost like convince me of these other things. So it's trying to, how do I show that he didn't actually say that in his question, but these are the things he really meant behind that question.
Yeah, it's kind of tough to do some things like that. It's kind of like a summary, if you will, statement of what the discussion was about. Yeah. Next page. What I have, the sentence that starts, I had never been to most of the states. The second sentence or third sentence, when we hit New Mexico, the landscape changed and became unrecognizable. Period. The land of enchantment indeed, period. So make that two sentences there. Also, next paragraph, you have creator lowercase in one sentence and then uppercase in the next sentence. So be consistent there. Okay, I would say uppercase. You use a term I rather like. It's a little, in one way, it's kind of a little awkward, but another way I liked it because it draws attention. And that is it's what's the last page for me, the third page. You say, people are still drawn to Jesus today. Sometimes the attractional quality of attractional quality. Now, that is a term, I would not have put those two words together. And at first I wanted to say, simplify it. Then I said, no, I kind of like this little turning of a phrase here. So what I would say to you, dear friends of mine, is occasionally you can play with words like this if it conveys your meaning in a different way, even if it's a little awkward sounding. I'm not saying this is necessarily awkward, but if you can twist, again, this is, you don't use the word attractional, for example. That form of the word of attractional is just not used that often. So here we put it with attractional quality. It just kind of has a nice little thing that when the reader goes along and says, bing, there's something a little different. I didn't expect that to come up. So I would just say, allow yourself to be creative in those ways from time to time. Also, one small thing, there is no E at the end of Osborne. There is just an N. He didn't bother with the E. He was British, and the British do what they darn well please, and that's just the how that works. So we tend to spell it like we'd spell Osborne, but no, it's Osborne. So there you have it. Okay, anything else on this?
I just thought that when he used that expression, the attractional quality, it was almost ironic what he followed it up with. It's hard to put into words, though we try. So it kind of reflects what he did.
Exactly. Yeah, it worked out nicely. I just liked it. Okay. I'm going to send this to you in writing, but let me just kind of, because with Paul dropping out, it kind of threw us a little bit out of kilter for the partners the next time. So here's who's going to be doing what next week. And again, our next month, and I'm going to give it to you. I also need to just address that real quickly, because two of our folks are going to be traveling, Josh and Brad. Not Josh. Yeah, Josh and Brad. Yeah, exactly. So I wonder, if y'all have your calendars or whatever in front of you, if we can look at it, could we move it back a week with just so it would be, I think it would be on the, would it be on the 20th? I got a calendar right here.
18th.
18th. Okay. February 18th or March 18th. Would that be a problem for anybody? Because I'm just looking at that, March 18th. Does that look okay? Well, all right. Let's try to move it back 1 week so that we can pick up two of our folks, because I just would like to do that if we won't throw things off too much. All right. Also, we're short. Well, now, oh, that messes up our devotions too. I need someone to volunteer to do devotions next time. We did all a switcho changeo, and now we're back to things with that. So, okay, Dean will do devotions. Okay, great, Dean. Thank you. All right, Dean.
I'll make sure I'm on time.
Okay. All right. Dean, devotions. It kind of has a nice ring to it. All right. Little alliteration. Okay. So I've got that. Okay. So here's what's going on next time then. Brad will prepare the article. Lynda will critique him. Dean will do the article. Josh will do the critique. Mike, article. Thomas, critique. Barry, you'll do an article. I'll do your critique. Okay. So there it is. We got, and I'll put this to you in writing when I send out the link for the YouTube video. All right. Any questions or anything? Have I thoroughly confused you? You don't care anymore. Just get off. Let me go back to my life. Okay. I can do that too. All right, friends. Well, thank you very much. Another good session. And this is no group for sissies. Like Lynda said, the honeymoon's over.
This is true.
Yeah. How do I know I'm accepted? Slap, 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 slap. That's how you know you're accepted. Okay. All right, friends.
I've been going through my boxes and papers and sermons and programs and whatever. And I found this this piece here, written by Major Thomas McWilliams. Help, sometimes being a Christian man feels complicated. I don't know when he wrote this.
Oh.
Or for what year, but it was there in my file.
Yeah.
Where did you, I wrote that for ARC. Where did you get that?
Beats me. I travel.
Yeah.
I go different places.
Yeah, see, once it's in writing, you don't know where it's going to pop up.
Yeah, you ain't kidding, man. You got to be careful.
Yeah. All right, friends. Well, have a good night, and I'll see you all when I see you. Okay.
Thanks,
everybody.
Good night.
See you. Bye now.
Ciao.